What's going on, folks? So, what we have here today is a Pox list I ran a while ago. Appeared on 90s MTG in a match against Doomsday. So, I wanted to go over my list to the best of my ability. That match was a few months ago, and I don't save each deck list. My deck lists are constantly changing. I practice them on Moto. I bring them to the store, and then the next week it all gets thrown up. So. I wanted to try something different this week. I wanted to do main deck, Leyline, and Helm as kind of a hedge against the graveyard decks. We have a lot of them at my store. There's always a breakfast deck, always a Reanimator deck. One guy there always runs Oops All Spells. So just trying to hedge that a little. I trimmed on some of the cards that are normally 4 ofs or maybe 3 ofs to try and fit it in. So we'll start with the land base, 24 lands. I think that's like your baseline if you're running 4 smallpox. I've seen folks running smallpox lists on YouTube, and sometimes they run 20 lands with 4 Urza Sagas. I'm just like, I don't know how that's going to work. So you want 24 lands as kind of a base. Believe it or not, the mana base isn't that great. We run 4 Wastelands, 4 Mistress Factories, so 8 colorless lands, no fetches. We tend to lean on Urborg pretty heavily sometimes. But that's kind of the nature of Pox. You need to get as much out of your mana base as possible because we're basically destroying everything on the field. The idea is that if you waste them all the way down to low-level resources, the factories can start chipping in. Oftentimes, they're the ones who take it all the way. 4 Wastelands, Wasteland in Legacy doesn't really need any precursor. It's, the fixed version of Strip Mine. Run 1 Dakmor Salvage as a way to retrace Raven's Crime. Also, if you're going to smallpox on turn 2, you play the salvage on 1 smallpox and then dredge back to salvage just so you know you're going to make a land drop. And the other flex card in that spot is Castle Lochthwain, which is really great card. A black land almost always comes in untapped. You only need 1 swamp, but a black land that comes in untapped that can start drawing you cards later. Can be very, very powerful. But unfortunately, a format full of wastelands it often has a target on its head. As far as the spells, running 3 rituals. I cut 1 ritual, 1 Raven's Crime, 1 Shrieking Affliction, 1 Sinkhole, 1 Hymn to fit in the Leyline package. So you're taking quite a bit of disruption out for this hedge. When it's good, it's good. When it's bad, it's bad. Just that's what hedging is. 2 Innocent Blood, 1 mana, destroy any creature. You need to have efficient removal in Legacy, and Murktide regions everywhere. Being able to hit a Murktide for 1 mana is great. The only issue is if they get ahead of you, and Murktide DRC or Murktide Delver becomes a lot more difficult. 2 Raven's Crime. In the modern version of this deck, I always ran 4 Raven's Crime, just because once you get past like turn 3, it's like all you want is Raven's Crime. You always want to hit. Thoughtseize can miss. If you run Inquisition that spot, it can miss as well. Whereas, once we're in rack territory, you have a Raven's Crime in the yard. You have 24 lands in your deck that are now discard spells. So that's kind of the idea with that. 1 Shrieking Affliction. It's pretty much just rack number 5. You can go back and forth which one's actually better, rack or Shrieking Affliction. Previously, I would have said the rack was better because it was able to damage planeswalkers. Now that it can't, I think it's a little bit more up in the air. I do like that the rack causes damage more often, whereas Shrieking Affliction, you get them down 2 cards, you don't do any damage. So I'm running 1 and 4. I guess you can, especially without sagas, I guess you can switch those up any way you want. Although I think decks do tend to have more artifact removal than enchantment removal. Meltdown is definitely a card that sees play. 4 Thoughtseize, because Thoughtseizes is the best targeted discard spell in the game. You lose 2 life, but you're always gonna hit your card. You know, nothing worse than casting Inquisition and like, oh, there's the Force of Will I need to take, or you know, especially with all the free pitch spells, sometimes you do need to take them. So being able to always take your opponent the card you need really helps. 4 rack, that's our win condition. That's the name of the deck. As we're causing folks to discard with Raven's Crime and Thoughtseize and Hymn to Torak and Liliana, you throw a rack down. Now they're in a position where they need to advance the game. They're not in a position where they're winning, but as they play cards, they're going to continue to take damage from the rack. And that's kind of the idea with the rack decks. They're more of a tempo deck. I don't know if you call it a tempo deck, but it's more like an aggressive aggro control deck, whereas typical Pox decks tend to be just straight control. You know, make the game drag out as long as possible and grind your advantage. Whereas rack decks tend to be disrupt your opponent, get them to a low level of cards in hand, drop a rack, and now put them in the position where they can't play out their cards without taking damage. Moving over to the 2-drops, 3 Hymn to Torak, best discard spell ever printed. You know, being able to hit 2 cards at random for 2 mana. I mean, they stopped printing cards like this for a reason because they're very, very good. So, you know, an early Hymn that hits lands can just, you know, stop an opponent dead in their tracks. You know, which is why it's often correct to Dark Ritual Hymn. You're like, well, you know, it's a 2 for 2. Like, yes, but I know the cards that I'm losing. You know, I look at my hand, I'm keeping this. Okay, I'm going to lose Hymn and Ritual. This hand still functions. Whereas your opponent keeps a hand, you turn 1 Hymn, and now they lose 2 cards at random. You know, a format like Legacy where everything is on such fine margins, you know, the game can end on the spot there. 2 Sinkholes. Sinkhole is by far the weakest card in the deck, but you know, not a lot of people expect. A lot of folks like, oh, I'll play around Wasteland, I'll fetch my basic lands. Maybe not, buddy. You know, they might only run 1 or 2 basics. Being able to hit them with Smallpox and Sinkhole could definitely throw them off their game plan. 4 Smallpox, namesake of the deck. The idea with Smallpox is that we're trying to get a 3 for 2. And that's how we get advantage from this. What do I mean? So we're going to spend 1 card to cast Smallpox. Ideally, we don't discard a card because we're hellbent. We don't run creatures. And so all we have to do is sacrifice a land. Whereas opponents, especially if they're playing creatures, they lose a land, they lose a creature, and they lose a card from hand. They lose 3. We've lost 2. Card advantage. You know, your opponent turn 1 Zenith for Dryad Arbor, Smallpox. They lose the Arbor, and they lose the land. So, yeah, Smallpox against creature decks, very, very good. You tend to want to hold your Smallpox until you can hit a creature in a creature deck. If you're not playing against a creature deck, then a lot of times you need to just Smallpox. You're basically casting Smallpox as a double-sided Sinkhole and Raven's Crime. But that's what we need to do, then that's what we need to do. For Liliana, she is the engine that gives Pox whatever viability he might have in this format. Dark Ritual Liliana is a good play against creature decks, but against non-creature decks, you know, a 2 for 1 yourself to just Raven's Crime your opponent. It's a lot of times it isn't the best play, and if you have a Dark Ritual Thoughtseize Lily, it's almost always better to Thoughtseize first, clear the way, see what you're playing against, and then see if the Lily is good. But yeah, she is the staple of Pox decks. I have her tattooed on my leg. We'll be getting her finished soon. There are people who play Pox, and then there are Pox players. I'm a Pox player. Moving over, 4-drop, we have Snuff Out, which isn't really a 4-drop. It's a free spell. Being able to kill a creature for free. You know, free spells are where it's at in Legacy. Nether Void is our lock piece where, you know, we Smallpox, we Sinkhole, turn 3 Liliana, turn 4 Nether Void. You know, if you can get to 5, now you can cast Sinkhole, Smallpox, and once they're under the Void, you know, unless they have 4 lands, they can't really progress the game. The thing with Nether Void though is if they're ahead on board, it's not good because now we're both under the void. You're gonna have trouble casting your spells, and they're just gonna keep beating you. Urza Saga makes Nether Void a lot worse because obviously they can create threats under the void without paying attacks. And this week let me not move it in OBS. This week I was running my 4 ley lines and a helm. A lot of graveyard decks in the format, and a lot of graveyard decks at the store I play at. So I was just trying to hedge, game ones and see if I can steal a few. Moving over to the board, we have 2 Null Rods, 4 Chalice of the Void. This is mainly for the artifact decks. Probably don't want to do Chalice on 1 because now you're not able to play your Raven's Crime, your Shrieking Affliction, your racks, but sometimes you need to. Usually you're going to drop Chalice on 0 against the decks that like to, play all the free spells. Next we have the cards for creature matchups. Engineer Plague and Snaring Bridge. In this slot you tend to want to play permanent-based Disruption because Liliana is so good against the creature decks. You always want to be upticking her. And, if you're playing a card like Toxic Deluge, when it hits, it's great. You wipe the board 3 mana. There's no other card in Legacy that has that effect. But at the same time, if you're ahead and you cast Liliana and you're upticking Liliana every turn, and then you draw a Toxic Deluge, you have to pitch it. Whereas if you draw an Ensnaring Bridge, okay, now creatures can attack. Lily's still upticking. Same thing with Engineered Plague. You drop a plague on either Orc or Illusionist or what a human, whatever fits the match that you're playing, and then you're able to. Let me just reset this. Sorry. Then you're able to keep those creatures off the board. So if you're playing against Breakfast and you put Plague on Illusionist, they can't go off into that. Over here, I run 1 Abyss, which is kind of like a swap out for Nether Void against creature decks. Chalice of the Void. Ether Vial and Cavernous Souls make Nether Void look pretty silly. So the Abyss being able to hit a creature every turn helps keep things clear. And then 2 Surgicals to add to the graveyard. Hey, it also helps against combo matchups. And then sometimes I like to Surgical someone's dual land. You're playing against Blue-Red Delver or against Doomsday. You Surgical the Underground Sea. You Surgical their Volcanic Island. They only have 2 lands left in the deck now for 4 Sinkholes and 4 Smallpox and 2 Sinkholes. So that's kind of the idea. This is the list to the best of my knowledge from what I remember. But let's go take a look at the match.
What's going on, folks? So here I am at Legacy Night at Game Storia playing against Doomsday. I'm on Pox as usual. Don't have the deck list from this one. I was running main deck lane lines with 1 helm. Just trying to be cheeky. A lot of the folks at the store run graveyard decks. There's always at least 2 Reanimator decks there. There's always at least 2 Breakfast decks there. So the main deck ley lines, I was just trying to hedge against some of my bad matchups. Doomsday is actually a good matchup for Pox as long as they don't go off turn 1. If they go off turn 1, it could be very difficult. The issue is that when a Doomsday deck goes off, they're consolidating down. You still have to cast a 2-mana spell, and against Pox, that could be very, very difficult. I also have the advantage that I only play Pox. I've played Pox exclusively for the last 10, 12 years. I know the matchups. I doubt many people are practicing against Pox in their playtest groups. So I think you're going to see later where Eric has to come up with a Doomsday pile where just he's not really able to get there because you don't know what you're going to be facing afterwards. You make your piles like, I'm going to have a Force of Will. It's like, well, what if you have no lands? You still have to cast your Thassa's Oracle. So we try and leverage that. He casts Brainstorm into fetch, trying to get himself set up here. I think game one, I would consider myself a dog. 2 and 3 after post board, I think, get a little bit better for me. But the idea is, I want to disrupt him as much as possible. Yeah, Dark Ritual Doomsday. All right, yeah, there she goes. Turn 2 Doomsday, not where I want to be. Dark Ritual Opposition Agent would be great. I don't run Opposition Agents. The only thing I think I have a Snuff Out in hand, so unless I didn't have a Snuff Out in hand. But Snuff Out, if they leave cards on top of their library, can knock out the win the game condition. But Eric gets there here. I think I just looked through. I don't know if I scoop. I mean, I'm hoping that Eric thinks I'm some type of Helm combo. I only show them a ley line in the swamp. At the same time, like, I always play box, so like really just everyone knows what I'm on. And so waste his land. He's just cycling through Street Wraiths here. There's the Cavern. 2 cards left, and there's the Oracle. Snuff Out could have done it. I didn't have it. That's the way she rolls. Game 2, I'm a little bit better suited. There we go with a turn 1 Thoughtseize. Thing I have to keep in mind is Urborg will betray me. I do run Sinkhole, so I'm able to take care of a basic island, but turning your basic island into an unwastable underground sea is pretty good for him. At the same time, I have to be able to cast my spells. So the situations were that he still would have been able to get black mana through his fetches, but he was able to lean on the basic for black. Yeah, so I'm going to take the Personal Tutor. You could Thoughtseize me. Force Negation's fine. I want this game to go as long as possible. The longer this game goes on, the more it's in my advantage, so I'm trying to slow him down. Is all Thoughtseize me? Yeah, sure. What do you got? Thoughtseize, Innocent Blood, Raven's Crime. You want to take a Raven's Crime? Go for it. Oh, I was playing. This was more my rack build, so I had Raven's Crime in there. I kept an Innocent Blood because I know that sometimes they either sideboard into like an Emrakul Shelldock, or sometimes they'll run like Sheldrids, or I've seen Doomsday decks bring in creatures post board. It's kind of like a juke, so that's why I kept the Innocent Blood in. Google, I'm not spending $1,000 on my phone. Forget about it. Okay, so Raven's Crime. Raven's Crime is good in the rack decks because it always hits. Later in the game, if people try to hold lands, Thoughtseize, any other discard be useless. Blackmail is the exception, but that you could recur Raven's Crime with your extra lands. Such a good card in the rack decks. As a matter of fact, like I would say, if you're playing rack decks, like it's a 4 of. Later, like if you play rack decks long enough, you get to those later games, and you try and make the game go long. You're going to be begging for a Raven's Crime so often. So I run the full 4. Thoughtseize you. He's going to brainstorm a response. Hide the cards he wants to hide. It's one of the weaknesses of Thoughtseize versus Brainstorm. Yeah, I have a Pox in hand, Innocent Blood. I couldn't see what the middle card was. An actual Pox. For those who don't know, Pox is like Smallpox, except instead of losing 1, you lose a third rounded up. So The idea with Pox is to get them to 4 lands, 1 creature, 4 cards in hand. Now it's a double sinkhole, a him to Torek, and Innocent Blood for 3 mana. All right, so he Force of Wills the Thoughtseize there. 2 for 1s himself. I just got to get this game to go on longer, right? He just put himself down the card. Just string this out. String it out. String it out. There's his personal tutor. So I know Doomsday's coming, right? He's going to bring that up. Yep, goes right on top of the library. Now, you'll notice he has a basic island and a fetch. And I believe I smallpox here, and I choose to keep the Urborg. If I would have chosen to sacrifice the Urborg, he would have kept the fetch, and he would have been able to get an Underground Sea to cast Dark Ritual Doomsday. So the reason I keep the Urborg is I need to be able to cast my spells after Doomsday, right? So that's what I'm playing towards. I was hoping he didn't have the ritual and that he would have needed the 3rd land to catch the Doomsday, because I know he has it sitting on top of his deck, right? So I have to keep the Urborg, right? Because I go first. I'm active player, and now he has 1 card in hand, which is a Dark Ritual into Doomsday. Yeah, well, there it goes. I just needed him to not have that ritual. Betrayed by my Urborg. It happens. Okay, so he gets to go through his deck and get his top 5 cards. Also, remember, he's going to take 8 life, go down to 8, and have no cards in hand. And I'm a rack deck. So if I go rack, he goes to 3. It has to win that game. He goes to 2. It has to win there. Yeah, but just the idea was it didn't matter when I picked Urborg. It didn't matter for him. He would have had black mana regardless. It mattered for me because I needed double black. And this is usually what takes the longest in a Doomsday game, is them for to make the Doomsday pile. So Eric makes the pile. And it's a difficult pile to make. You only have 1 land, and you need to cast a 2-mana spell. What if I sinkhole that land? You know, like, do you put there's my Affliction? It's basically just rack 5 and 6 in this deck. I think I was only. Oh no, I was running 3. So it was racks 5 through 7. And I pass. He goes to 5. Okay, so he pretty much has to win here. There's the LED. There's a rack. Eat it. He went down to 5. Now he takes 6. You know, I like the rack builds, and if there's a burn, burn decks in your meta and you're playing Pox, rack is the way you can beat it. Just make sure your opening hand has a rack effect. They're gonna vomit their hand. You know, trade the cards where you can, and just lay the racks as soon as you start dealing damage. Game 1, if you can drop 2 racks on them early, almost it's very difficult for them to race. You got to watch for Master Smithereens post board, so you want to hold your racks until you know the path is clear. Eric's going to start with a Underground Sea here. Thoughtseize B. I'm fine with the Thoughtseize. Now look at this. I have a Pox and a Raven's Crime, 5 lands, 2 Wastelands, which I know are going to be good against him. And he has to take a Raven's Crime with a Thoughtseize, which, like, not where you want to be, folks. Plus, I have a Dakmor Salvage, so, like, you're taking the Thoughtseize to prevent me from casting Raven's Crime once on the front end. But I have a whole fistful of hands to retrace it to. And a waste is, yep, better believe it. Now, if you Surgical the Underground Seas versus Doomsday, they're in trouble. Now remember, my goal is to just get this game to go. All right, misses a land drop. I smell blood in the water, and I thought these. Playing their Borg, which gives him force. My only other black land was a Dakmor Salvage that comes in tap, so that's why I went with the Urborg. He already missed the land drop, so I'm hoping the Urborg doesn't bite me. He is able to Dark Ritual into a Doomsday, which isn't terrible, because that means I still have a handful of disruption for him post-Doomsday. So there's Dark Ritual Doomsday. Betrayed by my Urborg. Yep. Okay, once again, you have to cast a 2-mana spell. And you only have 1 land. So, do you put a Lotus Petal in there? Hope I can't Sinkhole the basic. But if you play a Lotus Petal, you have no cards in hand. If you play a Lotus Petal, you can't cycle or draw a card, so you're going to have to pass back. If I Sinkhole that land, if I Smallpox, gets to be very difficult. It's not an easy pile to make. And if there are any Doomsday players watching, comment how you play against Pox. Have you ever even played against Pox? I think at the beginning of the stream, the Chris's chat took a vote, had me at 91% to win. Both very close matches, could have really went either way. I ended up, top decking racks when I needed them. But like I said, if you can win early, it's very difficult for me to interact. But the longer the game goes on, I will have the advantage. Pyro's LED, Wrath, Consider, Blank, Oracle. You can't count on Edge of Autumn to work after Pox or Wasteland. Yeah, see, so a path he would normally take, he's not able to because I can threaten his lands. Probably better than any other deck in the format. So now I draw. I think I just Raven Scrymed the shit out of him here. Yeah, so pitch the Salvage. Retracing Raven's Crime. With your 2 cards in hand, Eric, guess what I'm doing after that? We'll do it again. Boom. There's the Oracle. Oh, that's Force Negation. Or Thassa's Oracle, I'm not sure. Looks like Oracle. I think they run 2 just in case they get 1 jammed up in the hand. They have 1 left in the deck they could put into the Doomsday pile. So now he has to play this card. Otherwise, I'm going to Raven's Crime it. But if he doesn't, if it's, I think this is like a Lotus Petal. He's determining. Yeah, so cycle, Lotus Petal. Okay, good. You can cast the Oracle next turn, maybe. But you're at 3. So Rat kills you. And guess what I got? And that's all Shira, folks. So what Pox makes up for, what Pox lacks in selection makes up for redundancy. We run 4 ofs of our, of most of our cards. The idea is that when you have it, you have it. It's very difficult for Pox to come from behind. One of the reasons that is because cards that let you come from behind tend not to be good when you're ahead, and so you try and keep your draws live at all time. But that's Doomsday, and thank you so much for tuning in, folks. Hope you enjoy. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. Do my best to answer them. Love you guys. Have a